Good morning, good afternoon and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, but in particular ladies. Why? Because 102 years ago, the 19th Amendment of the United States Constitution was ratified and took effect. This one being, of course, the one that gave women the right to vote. But, let's not dwell on the mistakes of the past. Let's instead talk about what happened today, which is, of course, the well-awaited release of the Dragonflight talents for Demon Hunter. Demon Hunter being the lone class left out from the reveals. And we have gotten the Havoc 3 and the General Demon Hunter 3, but we're still missing the Vengeance Demon Hunter 3. I am a few hours in the past, it's not out yet, maybe tomorrow, which is when you see this, it might be out. But what is interesting is that even right now, the spec that looks the best out of these talents is still Vengeance, even without having a talent 3. The reason why, of course, we are about to see in the General 3 of Demon Hunter. Now, I have seen quite some people worried about Demon Hunter, perhaps because it was one of the newer classes, perhaps it was because it never really had a talent 3, perhaps it was because even when it was released in Legion, it had very few abilities, very few spells, very few things to work around with. So imagining some 70, 80 talent option nodes in the 3s was very difficult to imagine. So people were worried the Demon Hunter 3s were going to be quite difficult to come out as satisfying compared to the other classes and specs. But for now, the first impression is actually quite good. Remember when we made the rankings of the specs in terms of quality and even the class ones in terms of quality. Actually, if we were to ratify it now with the Demon Hunter, the General 3 of Demon Hunter would be by default at the very least in the A tier, because it's very good. And then we will talk about the Havoc one in a bit. But looking at the General Demon Hunter 3, there are some very, very good things in here. Let's start by saying that you don't really lose anything that you already had. So abilities like Consume Magic, abilities like Imprison, abilities that you had a choice of in your Talent 3. For example, the option between Soul Rending, Desperate Instincts and Netherwalk for your defensives, right? For the invulnerability, the immunity talent, the one to reduce the cooldown of your Blur and the one to give you Leech. Now for Havoc Demon Hunter, they are all obtainable at the same time. You have your Desperate Instincts right here, you have your Soul Rending right here, and you have your Netherwork right here. So extra defensives for Havoc Demon Hunter, for example. But what definitely might have caught your eye for Havoc Demon Hunter is definitely all of these icons, right? The right path of this General 3, which are these icons right here. These icons right here, because these are sigil icons, which are now part of the General 3. Which means Havoc Demon Hunter now has access to sigils. Not just the damage sigils, which is gonna be, whatever. If it doesn't do enough damage, it's gonna be completely forgotten. But what's more important is things like Sigil of Misery, to have the Disorient effect sigil, to have something like the Sigil of Silence, to give you an AoE silence as well. So this is quite important for a DPS spec like Demon Hunter. Also, towards the end, you might have noticed the icon of the Hunt. This was one of the few talents that were data mined before we even got the 3 out. Demon Hunter General 3 gets the Hunt as an option. I can already spoil the Havoc 3. I can already spoil it by saying you have the option between Elysian Decree and Fodder to the Flame. So you do have the Night Fae in your General 3, and then you have your Kyrian/Necro in your Havoc Demon Hunter 3. So you have up to 2 different Covenants abilities that you can take. Another thing that makes it in the General 3 is Fellblade. Now, Fellblade was yet another choice of your talents for Havoc, which was between Fellblade, Demonic Appetite, and Blind Fury. Now, Fellblade is right here, Demonic Appetite is right here, and Blind Fury is right here, although at a nerfed state. You don't gain 40 Fury per second. When you I-beam, you gain 20 Fury per second, but you have still the ability to take all of them at once. To finish the plethora of options for Demon Hunter, one of the main staples of Demon Hunter was the choice between Momentum and Demonic. In some cases, especially in Mythic Plus, when you wanted to pad a little bit more, Fel Barrage for even more AoE damage. Well, guess what? Now Fell Barrage is right over here between Fell Barrage and the Glaive Tempest option, but at the same time you also have Demonic as an option between Demonic and Demonic Origins to reduce the cooldown of Metamorphosis to a 2-minute cooldown but only make it last for 10 seconds. And then lastly, of course, Momentum, which is right down over here. So, you know, as a Havoc Demon Hunter, you now have the options to pick all these 3 at once, to pick all these 3 at once, to pick all these 3 at once, not to mention all these 3 at once. Essence Break, First Blood, and Cycle of Hatred. This is your Essence Break, this is your Cycle of Hatred, and this is your First Blood. So, you know, as far as choices go, you can basically take most of this stuff here, all at the same time. Not to mention there's going to be also a few options to take one of these two or one of these two at the same time. Oh, did I mention that Trail of Ruin and Unbound Chaos and Glaive Tempest can also be taken at the same time? This is Trail of Ruin, this is Unbound Chaos, and we are back to the option between Glaive Tempest and Fell Barrage. So across the classes and specs, Havoc is one of the specs that has the options to take the most at the same time out of its talents that they currently have in Shadowlands. The reason why I said that the General Tree almost looked better for Vengeance, even though we don't even have the Vengeance 3, is because there is quite a few things that Vengeance, on the other hand, didn't have access to. The main thing that Havoc did not have access to were the sigils, right? So Sigil of Flame, Sigil of Misery, and Sigil of Silence are the 3 mainstays for Havoc that become usable. But for Vengeance, Vengeance is a tank. So what do you want as a tank? Well, as Vengeance, you have the ability, besides something like Fellblade, you have the ability to take Chaos Nova, which is an AoE stun, which is already very good, right? As an option for your tank to have an AoE stun. You can also improve it, similar to your talents already, to reduce the Fury cost and the cooldown of Chaos Nova. But more importantly, you have Darkness and you have Blur as a Vengeance Demon Hunter, not to mention the utility of having now Vengeful Retreat as a baseline ability for Vengeance, plus of course the following talent to have some added utility like the slow behind Vengeful Retreat. But let's go back to the main course, the Darkness and the Blur. Blur itself can also be further improved with Desperate Instincts, as we said, to make it a 30% DR on a 1-minute cooldown, which is extremely good as far as tank defensives go. 30% damage reduction for 10 seconds on a 60-second cooldown is excellent as far as tanks go. And then you have Darkness. Darkness, which has a base cooldown of 5 minutes, and then you have the option. Do you want it to last 2 more seconds, or do you want it to have a 2-minute reduced cooldown, so making it a 3-minute cooldown? And this is excellent for Vengeance. That's why it looks so promising, because besides the things you will have in your tree as a Vengeance, you already know you have more mobility because of Vengeful Retreat being available to you. You already know you can have an AoE stun, and then you can have a raid cooldown like Darkness, as well as an extra defensive. And this is without even seeing your tree as a Vengeance. That's why it looks so nice. It's not bad. It's not bad by any means for Havoc. It's just that the new things available in here are a little bit more shiny for a Vengeance Demon Hunter than for a Havoc Demon Hunter. Now, about the tree itself for Havoc. So, you might have noticed the quite unique path and layout of the tree. It looks like almost like a rib cage, right? You have the center one and then you have all of the ribs to the side. I don't think it's going to remain like this. I think it's way too restrictive in the choices. You can go in the paths you can choose. It's way too wide. Having to choose between these two sides and then having to be some like 3 talents apart, it's way too wide. I don't think it's gonna stay like this. It's a little bit too restrictive, especially because of the spread of talents. It looks like most of the build is being centered around momentum. Now, I would ask my Demon Hunter friends to actually read the tooltip to notice the change of momentum, but I know you can't read. You are a Demon Hunter player after all, so I'm gonna read it for you. It says that Fell Rush and Glide and the Hunt and Vengeful Retreat increase your damage done. So there is an addition here, there is something new here. Glide. Gliding is now going to be part of triggering momentum. This is insane because normally speaking, with just your Fel Rush and just your Vengeful Retreat, you can't really keep up momentum at all times. Not to mention that even if you were trying to, you would have to have used your mobility. That was always kind of the drawback of momentum. It was a higher skill ceiling playstyle because you had to use your mobility abilities to extra damage in return. Now, with glide being part of momentum, this entire thing goes away. Now you can literally just glide left and right behind the boss or behind the pack of Mythic Plus and continuously gain your 12% damage buff with momentum. Of course, some players might not like it because it reduces the mentioned skill ceiling, it reduces the difficulty of the spec when you want to play momentum, because all you have to do is double tap your spacebar and start gliding to get the buff, right? So it's a little bit weirder. It is likely not going to be as satisfying to pull off a continuous run of momentum buff, because now you can just glide to gain it, so perhaps some players might be disappointed by the change in playstyle, but it's definitely going to make it much easier to reap the benefits of this buff. There are also plenty of returning powerful effects altogether you can take on this side. You can take, as we mentioned, Cycle of Hatred. You can take your legendary Burning Wound, will be down this side as well. You have Relentless Onslaught, which is your double chance to trigger a second Chaos Strike. It's your conduit, I believe. You have Chaos Theory, your spamming Chaos Strike extra damage. There are also some pretty decent additions to increasing the complexity of the build, like for example using Throw Blade to make the enemies take more damage from I-Beam, for example. Also giving you, because momentum has been made easier, giving you essentially a second level of momentum with initiative. Damaging an enemy before they damage you increases your critical strike chance by 15%, which is significant. What's also significant is that using Vengeful Retreat refreshes this potential to trigger the effect. So now you wouldn't just want to use Vengeful Retreat to Fel Rush in again to gain your momentum. Now instead, because momentum can stay up at all times because of glide, you can now use your Vengeful Retreat to trigger this buff instead. You can, as we already mentioned, choose between Elysian Decree and Fodder to the Flame down here, which is right after the powers of your meta. This one is going to instantly reset the cooldown of Blade Dance and I-Beam as you enter Metamorphosis, and this one is going to give you an extra powerful AoE explosion to your first Chaos Strike as soon as you enter Metamorphosis. Somewhat the main issue about this tree is that, as we said, it looks like this side of the tree currently is a bit too powerful compared to this side of the tree. This side of the tree isn't weak by itself. You have the option between Insatiable Hunger and Demon Blades. You have Unbound Chaos, which is also a pretty powerful AoE addition. You have Glaive Tempest and Fel Barrage, which is also a powerful AoE addition. You have Fel Bombardment, which is also another powerful AoE addition. You also have a whole bunch of synergy around Immolation Aura. You have this one right here, Burning Hatred, your already existing talent. You do have then Felfire Heart to increase the duration of Immolation. You then have Ragefire to increase the damage of your Immolation Aura. And then you have your Conduit, I believe, Growing Inferno to tick more damage of Immolation Aura over time. So, you know, it has a few things like the synergy with Immolation Aura. It has a few AoE standalone talents like Unbound Chaos, like Fel Barrage, like Fel Bombardment, but they don't make a build. Right, they are all like some nice additions perhaps on their own, but this side is a proper functioning build. You have the build around momentum, you have the buffs to momentum, you have the buffs to your Chaos Strike damage, your Chaos Strike extra chance to proc, plus the buffs to your I-Beam and the buffs to your meta. So it looks like, simply, it's just a stronger side. So overall, as we go back to the tier list that we made about specs, Havoc would have to be in the upper side of the ranking. Let me just grab it back up. Here it is. Yeah. So, you know, overall, the two specs we put here, we don't know yet about Vengeance, but even just by looking at the general tree, Vengeance is like by default here. But Havoc, you know, Havoc would have to be at the very least here, in the room for improvement tier, because of this side being too weak compared to this side. That would be the first impression of the Havoc 3. Definitely better than what some doomers and some depressed Havoc players were thinking. It's a much better overall 3. You do get a few good options right down here with the introduction of the sigils, and as we mentioned, you are one of the specs with the most freedom of choice in picking these talents, several of your already existing talents all at the same time. So overall, the TLDR is that it went better than expected. Yeah, I would have to say for Demon Hunter. The Havoc one is okay, it looks promising, it does have quite a few additions to your rotation. It looks like finally Havoc Demon Hunter might start playing with a few more buttons to the rotation. You have pretty much now freedom to add Fellblade to your rotation. You also have the freedom to add Essence Break to your rotation. You can use now Glide as an extra inside your rotation because of momentum. There are, as we have seen, quite a few buffs and extras to Throglaive, the extra benefits of using Throglaive as well. So, you know, even then it looks like you might start using a few more abilities in your rotation, which is always what I wanted for Havoc as far as spec complexity goes. So it looks nice. It looks nice so far for Havoc, and it looks promising so far for Vengeance, even without seeing the talent tree itself. So, with this one being said and done, we can leave each other to the rest of this Friday. Let me guys know, of course, especially you Havoc mains, what do you think about this first iteration of the talent tree, which is of course bound to change massively. Thank you, of course, as usual, to all of my Patreon supporters helping me to continue to produce content for WoW in these final stages of the alpha and soon to be early stages of the beta of Dragonflight, I am assuming. What you can also do to support my endeavor is to like and comment down below on this video, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. And lastly, for social meddling, you can follow me on Twitter, as well as subscribing to my Patreon right down at these two links. With this being said and done, I'm gonna leave you to the rest of the start of your weekend. Thank you guys again for watching, see you guys soon, and in the meantime, this is the last day, I believe, of hotness. 33 degrees, I think is the last according to the forecast of any hot weather until the next year. Let's hope for once my weatherman friends are right.